be seated. It's good to see you this morning as we gather together. If you didn't know, last night was a pretty exciting night at the Brighton Oasis. We celebrated baptisms, and we had 11 people get baptized last night. I mean, that's worth celebrating today. And so to see that happen, super cool. All ages, from little kids to 70-year-old men. Just a really, really cool experience. And afterwards, I was kind of walking around talking with people, and someone came up to me and said, "You know, Matt, like God's doing some pretty cool things at Crossroads." And I said, "I know, it's awesome. Like, we're just trying to hold on to what God is doing." And so if you are new with us, just know that as we gather together, we're all about experiencing God, what that looks like to experience God, his people, as we walk through this hour together, whether that's in his word or praying or singing, that ultimately our desire is to experience God together in this space. And so if you are new, know that my name is Matt Manning. I'm going to be the senior pastor here at Crossroads Church. And today, you find yourself kind of right smack dab in the middle of a series that we've called Be Wise, where we're looking at really the pursuit of wisdom for our lives so that we can live better lives, so that we can live lives that are really wiser. See, the truth of the matter is that we live in a world that would be marked by deep pluralism. And what I mean by that is that we live in a world where there are a multitude of voices, various groups that are all vying for positions of influence or power or really like supremacy in this world. And in a pluralistic culture, where we feel that probably the most is when it comes to really this constant struggle over moral authority, where people in our culture argue fiercely over what is right and what is wrong, what justice looks like, what human flourishing actually means. And as each group kind of brings their own vision to the public square, puts their own vision on the table, oftentimes it's met with opposition or even polarization or perhaps confusion as we discuss these kind of things. And as Americans, we probably feel that more now today than maybe we ever have, particularly because of the political climate that we are now living in. But in the midst of all of this, we often actually miss something that many ancient cultures seem to understand more intuitively than we do. And that is, as important as moral norms are, and they are vital, moral norms are absolutely vital, the reality is they aren't enough. Like, they cannot carry the full weight of the human experience. That moral rules by themselves simply don't address the complexities of the everyday life situations that you and I find ourselves in. See, for most of us, we have been trained when making decisions to ask the question, is it right or wrong? And I suppose that this came from our very well-meaning parents, right? That as we were growing up, probably for most of us, our parents carefully and very intentionally instructed us on the difference between right and wrong. And we were taught that if it is wrong, we don't do it, right? And so all of that from our parents was very, very good. Like, that's a very good lesson to be able for us to distinguish between right and wrong. However, as we grow, we actually start to have somewhat of a foolish assumption. And that foolish assumption is that if it isn't wrong, then it must be right. That if it's not wrong, then it must be okay. Like, if it's not illegal or immoral, if no one's going to get hurt, if there's not a thou shalt not against it in the Bible, then it must be okay, right? Like the Bible doesn't say not to do it, then it must be okay to do it, right? See, when we ask the question, is it wrong? Really, most of us, what we're really asking is like, how close to the edge can I get without actually going over? How close to sin can I get without sinning? In fact, in church world, we see this a lot, particularly like when it comes to teenagers, that oftentimes when teenagers meet with me, we sit down and they say something to the degree of like, "Hey, Pastor Matt, when I'm with my boyfriend, when I'm with my girlfriend, like, how far is too far? Like, when does physical affection cross the line?" And yet the reality is that's not just a teenage issue, is it? That's for us adults as well, in our relationships, with our finances, in our jobs, when it comes to our diets. Like, how close to the edge can I get without actually going over? If it's not wrong, it must be okay, right? See, the reason that you and I have trouble with that question right now is because we all know, like deep down inside, we all know just because there's not a thou shalt not doesn't suddenly mean that it's thou shalt, right? Like just because it's permissible Just because something is permissible doesn't always mean that it's what's best for us. In fact, all of us have had experiences in our lives, and we can point to different experiences in our lives where there was a situation in front of us. We pushed it through the lens of, is it wrong or is it right? We decided it wasn't wrong, so we went ahead and did it. And then we were left with a different question because we realized that this wasn't good for us. And so we asked the different question, how did I end up in this mess? Like, where did it all go so wrong? See, the issue for us is that when it comes to the vast majority of our lives is actually lived in the gray. We're asking the question, is it right or wrong, isn't even the best question to ask. Let me give you a few examples. Should I marry this person? Should I take that job? Should I make that move? When it comes to my kids' education, should I choose public, private, or should I homeschool them? Should I buy that car, go on that trip, attend that concert, watch that movie? Should I confront that person or not? Should I take the risk or should I play it safe? See, whatever the rules are, whatever you think the rules are, the reality is that the vast majority of what you face is not actually covered by those rules. That's why we need wisdom. And I want to suggest to you today that the reason that you may feel that sick, sinking feeling in your gut about your life is because you know that you're up against a situation that you don't actually have the wisdom to address it. That's the problem. We all know that it's not enough just to have the facts. It's not enough just to have moral fortitude. Those are good and helpful things, but they are not enough, that you don't have the wisdom, and as a consequence, you are perishing because of it. And so, what do? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. That's what I want to address today. Is I want to look at kind of framing this question that in a pluralistic world, the pluralistic world in which we live in, where the vast majority of the issues that we face, is it right or wrong, isn't even the best question to ask. What do? How do we decide when it comes to situations like that? And the way that we're going to try to answer that question is by looking at Proverbs chapter 8. And so if you have a Bible or a Bible app, I want to encourage you to go ahead and to open it there, that we are going to answer the dilemma by looking at this scripture. Now, if you've been with us through the beginning of this series, you know that it's Solomon, who most people consider to be the wisest man who ever walked on this earth. He sat down and he wrote this book, and this book, we know through Jewish history, actually became kind of a manual of sorts for young men, and what did it look like to live wise lives? This book in the Bible is known as Proverbs. And in the Proverbs, what we have discovered is that Proverbs is comparing the path of wisdom with the path of foolishness so that you can be wise the first time, not just the next time. That Proverbs is comparing wisdom and foolishness so that you can be wise the first time, not just the next time. Before the pain, before the heartbreak, before that uncomfortable situation, before the regret, that you can be wise this time, not just next time. And so for the last couple of weeks, we've looked at wisdom. We've defined what wisdom is, the pursuit of it, and why that this is important. And today, as we get into Proverbs chapter 8, we are going to look at one of the not just most well-known passages in Proverbs, but in all of the Bible. Because in Proverbs chapter 8, Solomon famously uses this poetic literary device known as personification, where he begins to point to us that wisdom is a person. He presents wisdom to us as a person, a woman known throughout history as Lady Wisdom. That in all of this, Solomon is painting this picture for us that wisdom isn't just some dusty old concept that we read about in a book, but it's like this living, breathing person chasing you down because literally your life depends upon it. And in this chapter, we begin to see what it looks like to make the wise decision in our life, not just the quote-unquote right one. So we pick it up in Proverbs chapter 8, starting in verse 1. Lady Wisdom is speaking to us, and here's what she says. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the ways, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries aloud, to you, O men, I call, and my cry is to the children of men. That Proverbs 8 begins by painting this vivid picture for us of Lady Wisdom standing in the busiest places of life. And the picture of here that's happening here is that wisdom is not in some faraway place. It's not hidden from us, but that she is standing in the middle of everyday life, calling out to us in the intersections, in the busy streets, the places where people are hustling and making decisions every single day. And the idea behind the picture that's being painted here is that you don't have to be some scholar or sage of the desert, that you don't have to be a pastor or go to a mountaintop experience in order to find her, that Lady Wisdom is right where we are already at. That she's speaking in the places where you and I, where we already live and where we already walk. And here's what she says to us in verse 8, that all the words of my mouth are righteous. There's nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. There is a progression to her speech that is happening here. That Lady Wisdom looks at us and says, look, I'm more important than the silver and the gold and even the jewels in this world. And then she makes this audacious claim that she is even more important than the things that we most desire in this life. In other words, what she is saying is that having great life circumstances, whatever those may be for you, whether that's fame or fortune or power or beauty, is nowhere near as important as having wisdom. The ability to grasp a situation, to understand what to do with it, how to do it the right way at the right time. That it's so important to have wisdom in life circumstances. Why? Listen, if there's nothing else that you hear today, hear this. That the reason that wisdom is so important to our lives is because only a tiny fraction of people ever get their life circumstances exactly to where they want them, and there's nobody who's able to keep them there. And we know this. We know this, that there are plenty of people who have talent, there are plenty of people who have money, there are plenty of people who have fame, there are plenty of people who have intellect and charisma and good looks, and they have gone nowhere on this earth, or even worse, they have made a mess of their lives. I mean, come on, we're in a place in our society, within our culture, where we actually celebrate Hollywood, the people who have the fame, the money, and the looks, that we actually celebrate them when they don't make a mess of their lives. That's where we're at in culture. And we all know people, on the other hand. We know people who have little talent, little money, little natural charm. Nobody gives them a second glance because of their looks, and yet they are flourishing in their life. What's the difference? Wisdom. See, in our culture, we believe that if we know the rules, and if we're able to play by those rules and determine right and wrong according to those rules, if we can move towards what's right and away from wrong, then we will be able to make good decisions. But again, the problem for us is that the vast majority of the decisions that we face in this life, the rules and the facts are not enough. That it cannot bear the full weight of the human experience. Verse 12, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence. And I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. See, the Hebrew words, there's 3 Hebrew words here that are translated for us. The first is translated for us prudence. And what prudence means is simply how things really are, to know how things really are. To cut through the voices of this world, to remove the lies, to remove all of the spin, all of the deception, to cut through the clutter. That society is filled with lies, and prudence is the way to cut through all of that, to see things the way that they really are. The second word that we run up against is the word knowledge, a term that we've seen every single week of this series. And just as a quick reminder, knowledge is not information. Actually, when it comes to the Hebrew educational system, they almost have no concept of head knowledge like we do. See, the Western world is really built on the Greek system of education, where it is very, very cognitive. If you are able to recite information, if you're able to regurgitate information, if you're able to put information on paper during a test, then we say you know it. But the Hebrew educational model is very different from that. Basically, the idea of knowledge when it comes to Hebrew is if you don't live it, then you don't actually know it. Like they have no category for head knowledge. If you don't live it, you don't know it. And so putting these two words together, what we come to, prudence and knowledge, captures the idea of us saying something like this, like, okay, I understand the way that things actually are, and I have the ability or the knowledge to take that and to actually implement it into my life. Then the third word that shows up here is the word discretion. And it means to be like shrewd or wily or clever. Maybe in a modern context, we could say street smart. Now, typically, none of those words have like positive context in our culture, but not so in the Proverbs. The idea is that you are skilled at this, that you understand that the way that things should be, that you're able to cut through the clutter. You have the ability to actually make change. And now as you change, you are doing it skillfully, wily, clever to get the job done. In other words, you can't just go to the street corner and start yelling at people. Right? You can't just have strong, angry political opinions and think that something's going to change. That we have to be more sophisticated than that, more skillful, more clever, and figure out ways to come together for mutual flourishing of all people. In other words, what Solomon is emphasizing in these verses here is that wise decisions flow from a wise heart. And when a situation arises and we go, what should we do? It teaches us to become the kind of person who uses prudence, knowledge, and discretion to choose well. That when a decision is in front of us, the wise person doesn't first ask, is it right or wrong? Instead, a wise person begins with this, with the decision that's before me, does it strengthen my integrity or feed my selfishness and my pride? Does it help me grow into the kind of person that God has designed me to be? Am I making this decision out of humility and trust or out of fear and ego? See, wisdom isn't just about what I get. It's about who I am becoming in the process of the decisions that I make. From there, we go into verse 22, which begins probably the most famous part of Proverbs chapter 8, where Lady Wisdom looks at us and says that the Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago, I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limits so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him, like a master workman. And I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world and delighting in the children of man. See, when it comes to the ancient creation accounts, all of them come out of a power struggle. Choose the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Norse, the Greeks, the Romans, it doesn't much matter. All of them would say that the world was created out of some kind of power struggle. The gods were fighting with the giants, or a god was fighting with another god, and out of that fight came the world in which we exist. In more modern times, we would describe kind of the creation of the world as maybe a random act of accidents. It was just a random accident. It's only in the Bible do we have a creation account where the world is created not out of random accident or a power struggle, but on the basis of wisdom. That in overwhelming joy, God, through wisdom, created the world to be a place of beauty and power and order and peace. This is why the sages of Israel, the wise men of Israel, said that wisdom works. That if God created the world according to wisdom, then that means that there has to be a pattern to it. That this isn't random, it's not chaotic, it's not unsophisticated, that there is a fabric to reality. And so if wisdom is what made the world, then we as people have the ability actually to see the patterns of wisdom, that we can perceive to a great degree the patterns of this world, live in accordance with them, and therefore live wisely. So if, for example, we all know that there's a pattern, there's a physical pattern to the reality in which we live. There's this physical reality that has pattern to it. Take, for example, the pattern of aerodynamics. That when it comes to the pattern of aerodynamics, objects that choose to live in harmony with aerodynamics flies. And objects who ignore the pattern of aerodynamics ultimately crash. So too in our lives when it comes to our relational reality. That there is a pattern that governs the relational reality of our lives. And if we choose to live to it, then our lives thrive. And if we choose not to, then the relational lives crash. When it comes to the way that God created the world, that there's a pattern to the spiritual reality. And if you operate your heart and your conscience and your emotions in a way that is not in accordance with the pattern, your spiritual life will ultimately crash. That foolishness is going against that grain. That foolishness is going against the pattern, against the fabric of the way that the world was created. And that foolishness always leads to breakdown. And what we see in verses 22 through 31 is this picture of wisdom present with God at creation, shaping the order of the world, which means that wise decisions are those that harmonize with how God designed life to work. Things like truth and justice and integrity and generosity. That if a decision fights against the way that God has created the world, the order of the world, it may look easy on the onset, but ultimately, according to wisdom, it will be disorder in the long term. And so a wise person knowing this begins to look and begins to ask this question, not is it right or wrong, but does my decision align with how God ordered the world? And this is where it becomes so very important for us. In order for us to make not just the right decision, but the wise decision, we must admit that there is a pattern to this world. Like God has actually created this, and in his creation, there is pattern to it. Verse 32. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. Simply put, finding wisdom brings life and favor from God. Ignoring or rejecting wisdom leads to harm. And here we begin to see that wisdom isn't about getting success fastest or avoiding pain in our lives. It's much more about choosing life-giving paths that lead to flourishing, not only for myself, but for those who are also in my community. Which leads us to a third question that we ask when it comes to decisions. That will this decision that I'm making ultimately bring life and flourishing, not just short-term gain? See, it's these questions that help us make better, wiser decisions when it comes to the complexity of the lives that we live. For the vast majority of the decisions that we face, right and wrong, isn't even the best question to ask. The better question that we ask is it wise? Is it wise? And in determining is it wise, we just walk through these three questions. With the decision before me, does it strengthen my integrity or feed selfishness and pride? With this decision, does it align with how God has ordered the world? Will it bring life and flourishing, not just short-term gain? And I just believe that if you and I were able to pause, when it comes to the decisions that we have to make and the complexity of our lives, that if we were just able to pause for a moment and to be able to answer these three questions, that the story of our lives would be radically, radically different. See, the beauty of Proverbs chapter 8 is in bringing wisdom alive for us. It's personified. This abstract value or virtue becomes a person. It's this wonderful literary device to help us understand that wisdom isn't about mastering kind of a bunch of rules, but it's about an intimate relationship with wisdom itself. You long for wisdom. This personification, as wisdom speaks to you and I, is gripping when it comes to the literature. But I want you to ponder something today. What if Proverbs chapter 8 isn't just a poem? I mean, it is a poem, it is poetry, but what if that's not all it was? What if it's not just a poem? What if the wisdom of God was really a person that you could know and love? And what if you were able to get into this relationship with this person, and if you did, it would make you wise? I mean, what if this wasn't poetry, but actually a marker that was pointing to some greater reality? See, in John chapter 1, the gospel of Jesus Christ begins with a chapter that is based almost entirely on Proverbs chapter 8. Here's how John begins his Bible, or his gospel, in John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, these famous words given to us. That word is the Greek word logos. And it carries with it this understanding that wisdom is expressed. That's what logos means, wisdom expressed. And so an entirely appropriate translation for John chapter 1:1, and maybe this will bring clarity to a passage of Scripture that seems to be a bit cryptic, would be something like this: that in the beginning was the wisdom, and the wisdom was with God, and the wisdom was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And the wisdom became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. What is John telling us here? Do you see it? He's telling us that Proverbs chapter 8 isn't just poetry, that it's a foreshadow to the reality that the wisdom of God became a person, that the one who called out in Proverbs now walks into history. The one who spoke creation into being now speaks face to face with us. The one who invites us to choose life lays down his life on the cross in order that we might have eternal life. Like, this is a game changer. This is a game changer. It means that the wisdom of God is not just something that you learn, but someone you meet. That wisdom is not mastering information, it's about entering into a relationship. And the promise of Proverbs chapter 8 is ultimately fulfilled in John chapter 1 in the person of Jesus. If you seek wisdom, you find him. If you love wisdom, you love him. If you walk with wisdom, you walk with him. See, when Proverbs calls us to seek wisdom as our life, John shows us that seeking of wisdom ultimately leads us to the person of Jesus, that we are seeking him. To know him is to become wise. To walk with him is to walk in wisdom, and to love him is to find the life that Proverbs promises us. A life that is full of satisfaction, that speaks deeply to the inner desires of our soul, and one that knows that at the end of this life, there is more to come. And if you would like to have that conversation about what that looks like to walk with wisdom, to walk with Jesus, we would love to have that conversation with you. 2 ways to do it. First is on your way out today, you can just stop by the wall that says Jesus, and we'll have that conversation right there with you. If you need to think about this a little bit more, you can just tap in front of you on that tap, click the word that says Jesus, and we'll have the conversation that way as well. Will you bow with me in a word of prayer? Jesus, we come to you today, Lord, acknowledging and seeing that you are the wisdom that Solomon spoke about all those years ago. That you were the one that was present at the beginning of creation, that laid the very foundations of this world. That it was you that calls out in the busy street corners of everyday life where we hustle and make decisions. It's you, Lord Jesus, who comes to us and says, in me you find life, but apart from me is only death and destruction. And that you, Jesus, came in this world not to just live life, but to die so that we might experience the life that is promised in the Proverbs. Jesus, we thank you for your word. We thank you for its insights. We thank you that through Proverbs chapter 8, that we're given a framework not just to make the quote-unquote right decision, but that we're able to make the wise decisions of our lives. But Jesus, ultimately, we need you. And so, Lord, I pray that you would make yourself known right now. That we would see you, that we would feel you, that we would experience you now and in every moment of our lives. Jesus, we need you. We love you and we thank you. It's in your name that I pray. Amen.